First of all, on behalf of the Aero Club, welcome. My name is AJ Barade. I'm filling in for Eric. I'm the treasurer of the Aero Club. Welcome to our speaker series. We try to have different professionals in the industry come and give some talks to our members. As most of you do know, unfortunately, we had to pass on the Crystal Eagle dinner this year. And so in lieu, we are trying to have these speaker sessions where we could learn a little bit about different areas of the aviation industry. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you're back, that means we're doing a pretty good job. So welcome back. Our goal for scholarships is still $6,000. We want to still keep that promise and award it to 3 students, which will help them toward their aviation career. We do have a GoFundMe. I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat. So if you're feeling generous to contribute, please do. A little bit can go a long way. We've had some folks even mail us some checks, so that amount doesn't show on the website, but it's going up, which is great. So if you would like to, I'll go ahead and send that link in there. Getting down to it. So last week we had a talk by Paul Marshall about DART, which is the Disaster Airlift Response Operations in California, and I can't think of a more relevant time to the importance of that speech and that talk, especially with all the wildfires going around and the lightning strike fires in the Bay Area. Hope everybody's safe and hopefully your loved ones are doing well or being evacuated to safe areas. It's right in a lot of our backyards. But that should really emphasize the importance of our county airports and how much of a lifeline they do provide to not only first responders, but also to volunteers who come in and really pump a lifeline into communities that are affected by these fires. So with that, I want to introduce our speaker for today, Stephen Rubke, who happens to be a friend of mine as well. He's a cargo pilot with Kalitta Airlines in Michigan. Stephen's a California native who grew up near Riverside, and he moved to the Bay Area in 1998, where he began his flight training at Sierra Academy of Aeronautics in Oakland in 2000. He got his first flying job in 2003, flying the Beach Duchess and a Cessna Centurion for an aerial mapping services company. And his aviation career has covered many areas of the industry, including general aviation, aircraft sales, corporate and private aviation, and most recently a 121 airline operation. Stephen is a captain of the 747-400. He has the privilege to see much of the world every month and enjoy numerous foreign countries when he's not flying. He graduated in 2007 with a BA in geography from San Jose State University. Go Spartans. And if you have any other questions for Stephen, please do put them in the chat. I'll go ahead and ask them at the end of his presentation. Stephen did just come back from a pretty long, grueling flight, so I really appreciate him being here. I believe it was about 21 hours from Brussels here, and there's a couple legs before that, so thank you for taking the time. And today he's going to share with us his experiences as a 747 pilot, and he's going to give us some insights to some of the missions that they've had to fly specifically regarding to the COVID pandemic and cargo missions that have happened revolving around that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen and go ahead and take it away.
Well, thanks, Bay. I appreciate it. I was just thinking, hopefully my power will stay on because I'm sure as most of us in Northern California are used to these rolling blackouts with PG&E.
Right.
I am a captain with Kalitta Air on the 747-400, and we have had a major role in the airlift operations coming out of China, and it's all kind of related to like this bigger cargo push that's been happening. But there was a forecast at the end of last year where we kind of thought we were going to see a big slowdown in business, and there was a little bit of a kind of a nervous feeling, at least at our company. I can't speak for FedEx or UPS, but there was kind of a concern that we were going to see a slowdown in business, and we had even laid off some contract maintenance workers that we had at our main maintenance base in Oscoda, Michigan. But and once this COVID situation started up, it was kind of a confusing time initially where we weren't sure, um, what it would entail in terms of, how it would affect the manpower, the labor, right? Because I think we were all, it was a very mysterious virus initially. And then, further to that was how international air travel would, and just international air operations would be affected, um, because, who knows if they wanted to close down borders and what that would have meant for trade specifically. So big question mark at the beginning. But the initial response, at least for our company, as some of you may have seen in local news, was that we outfitted some of our airplanes for special missions with the State Department to evacuate American citizens overseas in places like Wuhan, China, where we basically take our cargo jet and slide in a bunch of seat pallets, airline seat pallets, and there's also a special container that we can slide in through the nose cargo door of the airplane that is essentially a safe, airtight medical facility that the CDC uses for evacuating people from zones like this. More famously, or more recently before this, used in the Ebola crisis a couple of years ago in Africa. So Kalita Air just happens to be an airline that is familiar with these sort of things, and the famous slogan, I guess, that the headquarters, the people in headquarters like to use is "You call, we haul." And I mean, we really fly anything and everything, and just being able to be flexible in the mission for things like State Department evacuations is, I guess, lucrative for the company, and it's lucky that we're able to be useful in that aspect. But yeah, so after that initial kind of I guess period of uncertainty, where we weren't sure how things were going to progress, then we saw China start to open back up. Because there was a short time, a brief window in there where we were actually bringing supplies or whatever. I can't even tell you what it was, but we were bringing payload into China and not taking much out because everything in China had closed down, and there just wasn't much production happening. Just anecdotally, I went to buy a pair of AirPods at the Apple store in Anchorage. I want to say in April or May, and they were like almost completely out of stock because they just weren't getting resupplied from China, and because the factories in China had shut down, and people had been staying at home in the initial phase of that the virus. But once things started opening up again, then we saw this massive demand for airlift out of China. And a lot of that, in fact, almost exclusively from what I've seen, has been personal protective equipment, like face masks and stuff like that. We really don't always know what's on the main deck of the airplane, but when you go down, you can look at the boxes, and almost all that stuff out of China is personal protective equipment. And so, because China has that production capacity for things like that, well, for anything really, I guess, the rest of the world was sort of reacting to the virus, and I think we saw, here in America initially was like they kind of downplayed the necessity of face masks, and from what I understand, that was to kind of keep the supply that we had intact for medical professionals. But now that we have this huge influx of supply from China, the production has responded to the needs, the demand. Now that's, everyone's supposed to be wearing face masks, and that's a lot of what we've been flying out of China. In addition to other things like, I think goggles and medical suits and stuff like that. So yeah, that's been from the, I don't know, 5 or 6 flights that I've done through mainland China in the last couple months. That's been almost exclusively the cargo. No hazmat. If you're carrying a lot of tech products, you'll get a hazmat notification from the loadmaster because of the lithium-ion batteries generally. So, but we don't get any of that. There's no hazmat. There's no perishables. It's just all boxes full of medical supplies and personal protective equipment. So that's been it. And one of the additional facets of this China flying, which has been the bulk of our flying for basically since the start of the crisis, was we used to overnight there, but we don't do that anymore because China has implemented, as many other countries have, border controls with health screening, and so basically nobody wants to go to China and have to get off the airplane, test for COVID, possibly test positive, and then be forced to stay for 2 weeks in a Chinese quarantine facility. You may have seen recently in the news some FedEx pilots going through Hong Kong because Hong Kong has ramped up their COVID testing, and I'll circle back to that in a second because it was kind of an interesting anecdote related to that. But these FedEx pilots going to Hong Kong test positive for COVID, even though they're asymptomatic, and then they end up in these really, really Spartan, I hesitate to call it a hotel room. Even from the pictures I've seen, it's like a cot in an apartment building with like a bucket, a sink, and a toilet. And that's it. So everyone else that's operating through China and Hong Kong have been very nervous about any possibility of having to endure those kind of quarantine conditions. So right now, what we do generally is operate from a different country, usually Korea. We're out of Incheon, Korea, because their health screening at the border, at least for now and for the previous, I don't know, I guess basically since it started, their health screening has been fairly nominal. And, they take your temperature and ask you for, symptoms in the last 14 days, but they don't require you to take a coronavirus test like Hong Kong and mainland China do. So we kind of base all of our crews there, and what we'll do is we'll operate flights from Incheon into numerous cities in mainland China, and then generally speaking, our cargo all goes eastbound back through Anchorage. So that will generally amount to a 13 hour block time for the day, usually an hour and a half to 2. So the longer flights from Incheon to mainland China are about 2.5 hours, but somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours to get from Incheon to mainland China, and then roughly 8 hours to get back to Anchorage, and that will generally involve about 3 hours of ground time in China while they load the airplane up. So it's kind of a long day, but we operate with double crews. So, basically just break the flight time in half. And if your jet lagged body will cooperate with you, you can sleep in the bunk for, half the flight if you're lucky. That's kind of how we've been doing it. And related to that, initially in that unknown period at the beginning, our union negotiated with the company to add a couple of hours of hazard pay to flights that operated through China. So it was quite lucrative for a couple of months there to pick up, within a 24-hour period, you could pick up, close to 17 hours of pay credit, which is good, and a lot of guys went for that and made a lot of money doing that kind of flying. Although I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I can only do that kind of duty day so many times a month. So I wasn't competing for that flying. But although I just ended up inadvertently going through there several times. Now that the virus, the fear factor of the virus has gone down considerably, I would say. The company has ended. We had a set term on that hazard pay agreement that we had with the company. That's ended, and the company has not renewed it. So no more hazard pay for China, unfortunately. But it's still a huge demand for our flying out of China. In fact, we've cut back on other contracts that we have. Like we had a contract with Japan Airlines going from Chicago to Narita and back, and I guess we sold that contract or subleased it to another operator so we could focus our flying on China cargo, which is paying, as I understand it, significantly more than a lot of the other contracts. So that's really the gist of it. And I did want to circle back to that story about Hong Kong, which was it must have been there in April or May. And they hadn't tightened up their border restrictions, just kind of asked you, they took your temperature and asked you a couple questions as you went through the airport and passport control. And I was riding to the hotel in Kowloon, which is sort of in the downtown area across the bay from central Hong Kong. And I was talking to the limo driver about it. I was at, are restaurants open or bars open? He's like, oh yeah, everything's open. It's fine. Like, no problems, no problems. And then now they've had, in the last couple of months, they had this resurgence of cases, and they locked everything down. And now they have this virus testing at the airport, and you're basically in limbo for a couple of hours. I guess they do turn around the test results pretty quickly, but still, if you can imagine some of the flights we do, being on duty for 15, 16, 17 hours sometimes, and you get to Hong Kong and you have to sit at the airport awaiting your COVID test results. It's not pleasant, and we've been doing everything we can scheduling wise to avoid having crews lay over there. So with regard to the rest of the world, it's really hit or miss. Most of our DHL flying, which is a good chunk of our business, we go through Leipzig, Germany is a very major hub, Brussels in Belgium, Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, and then, Hong Kong and Anchorage are the big ones. So we're trying to reschedule that flying so we avoid Hong Kong. But as far as the other countries, Germany does not require COVID testing at the airport, which is nice. It's just health questionnaire. Bahrain is a little bit more locked down. I guess they have a proportion to their population. They kind of have some bad COVID numbers, so they do usually require testing at the airport. And from what I've heard, it is a very invasive nasal scrape. I've had a few nasal swabs myself. not too bad, but I have it on good authority that in Bahrain they said they go in and then they make a left turn with the Q-tip, which sounds pretty awful. So I'm glad fortunately the last time I did go through Bahrain this month, but I'd had a test in Germany that qualified me to skip the Bahrain test. So I was lucky in that regard. And as I said, Korea is they're fairly lenient, I guess. They don't require any kind of nasal swab or quarantining, but it is a very weird time to be a cargo pilot because going international, obviously, most countries have restrictions, especially on Americans coming into the country. Even going to Hawaii, if you're a tourist going to Hawaii, you have a mandatory 14-day quarantine. But as cargo pilots, or I guess operating crew members, we are exempt from that. Although there are some limitations that they expect you to abide by, but for the most part, you just go to your hotel and you don't have to really report to anyone. So it's kind of a weird limbo to be in terms of traveling overseas, and yeah, it's just a very strange time for travel right now. And I was going to add also in relation to that, Sydney, Hong Kong, and Bahrain, those locations do require us to stay in our hotel rooms when we lay over there. However, Germany, you can kind of go anywhere and do this. So I got my hair cut there at the beginning of the month. So Germany's pretty open and lenient, but they have the same kind of general restrictions of wearing a face mask in businesses, like a lot like Korea and other places that we go to. But so that's it. I mean, that's kind of the diversity of things that we're seeing as we go overseas and work in this pandemic. And there are rules are changing every day, which makes makes life interesting, because you never know. Like I said, a couple months ago I was in Hong Kong, and it's like, yeah, you want to go to the bar, you want to go to the restaurant, no problem. But now you can't even leave the hotel. And in Hawaii, a couple months ago I was there, they were briefly opened. They had just kind of started lifting restrictions, and now from what I understand, they're back on a stricter lockdown. And then I guess I'll take this opportunity now just to share some pictures here from I just have a couple that are related to the flying that we do. Let me get this here. This is not China. This is from a couple years ago. Oops, I guess the slideshow is automatic. Sorry about that. But this is a Trent 1000 engine for a 787. That's what it looks like on the main deck of a 747. This is one of the ICAS messages we get if we don't press any buttons in the cockpit for a few minutes. Just it's the airplane recognizing its mission, just making sure the pilots aren't falling asleep. So you have to press a button in order to make that to clear that message. That's one of our airplanes. That's a former passenger jet, so it's distinct from a regular 747 freighter in that it lacks the nose cargo door, so it can only load cargo on the main deck through a large barn door on the side behind the wing, which is how we load most of our cargo anyway. So it is nice though, because it has a larger upper deck, so it's got a little bit more room for just for people to spread out and not be stepping all over each other. This is from one of our Chinese stops. Some of the cities do require that when you go outside, you have to wear this protective suit. Sorry about the slideshow failure here. It is a little interesting because the Chinese, I know there's some conspiracy theories about, maybe the virus is man-made, or it came, the Chinese designed it to do, whatever, fill in the blanks. But the Chinese actually think, or some of them think, that the virus came from America, and so they're kind of concerned about protecting themselves from Americans. So that's the guys have to do the walk around. They have to wear that gear. And then this is just cargo on the main deck from China. Not much to see there. But it's full in terms of volume. All the way up to the ceiling of the main deck. Normally, not much in terms of weight. Just kind of heavy stuff, but or sorry, not heavy stuff, but just bulked out in terms of volume. And that's just a pretty picture I took of the cockpit at night. And this is from the main, the L1 door looking down the side of the airplane. And those are boxes of PPE from China. You can see kind of there, it says face mask. And then this is me, this is getting our health screening from the Chinese officials there in their spacesuits, filling out the paperwork. They just take our temperature. They don't, nothing too invasive. You fill out their paperwork, and they take your temperature, and then you kind of go back to pre-flighting the airplane as usual. And that's a factory-built freighter with the cargo door open. I think this was in Helsinki, Finland, if I recall correctly. But anyway, there's my very sloppy slideshow. Sorry, I couldn't get it to stop advancing, but I think that's about it in terms of flying in the Corona era. So if you want to open up to questions, Abe, I'm ready when you are.
Yeah. So I got a couple questions here. I'll start with one that was similar to the last picture you had up there about your PPE. Are there any specific steps or procedures that you have to do to protect yourself from the virus, like other than just a mask?
Well, I guess I kind of skipped over a little bit of an important part there. What we do have is cleaning supplies on the airplane. So every time the airplane changes crews, the first thing we do when we get in the airplane is we put on latex gloves and we wipe down the cockpit with some apparently very hazardous sanitizing wipes. It's not like the household stuff that you buy at Target, and the Clorox wipes. This is like serious antiviral stuff. And so that we try to wipe down the cockpit, the heavily touched surfaces as much as we can. Because once we're in the airplane, there's no, especially for the flight segments that we fly, there's no real practical way to, isolate yourselves from other people that you're sitting a couple feet away from. We don't wear the masks while we're flying. Getting from the hotel to the airplane, we have masks on and try to abide by, whatever local requirements there are. And then once you're at a station, it just kind of varies from place to place. Most of America and Europe just have to have the mask on. Some of the Chinese cities require that full suit, like you saw in the picture, but not all of them. So it's kind of weird. It differs from place to place in terms of the local requirements for people exiting the airplane. I had a funny one in Zhengzhou, which is a couple of hours west of Incheon. So it's just a little bit inland there in China, but we get there, and then the Chinese customs officials come on in their little spacesuits, and we have our masks on, thinking like, okay, like we're playing by their rules. And then this guy, and he's got his spacesuit on, and it says police on the front, and he comes up to the cockpit, and he's like pointing at us, like pointing at his face, and then pointing at us, and we're all, there's like we don't he doesn't speak English. We don't speak Mandarin. We don't know what's going on. And finally, one of the other guys was able to translate for him. He's like, he wants you to take your mask off so he can verify your passport picture. But we're thinking like, do we need to put goggles on, or we didn't know until the translator finally came along. So yeah, that's kind of how we're dealing with the personal protection on a daily basis in day-to-day operations. So
Nice. Okay, another question here is, could you give us a brief timeline of your career, maybe when you first started with your first aviation job to how you became?
Sure. Yeah, I do want to preface it as I always do by saying that my aviation career went nothing at all like I thought it would. It was a very zigzaggy road with with at least one reset in the middle there. But yeah, so I started flight training in 2000, Sierra Academy in Oakland. For those of you who have been around the Bay Area long enough, might remember it. They're not there anymore. They haven't been there for several years, but started flight training there. I was working at the local FBO there in Oakland at Kaiser Air while I was doing my flight training. And one night, shortly before I finished my commercial ratings, one night this Duchess pulls in and it's got this weird antenna hanging off the back. And I asked the pilot, like, hey, what's with the antenna? He explained that he worked for an aerial mapping company, which I'm not going to explain this because it's going to bore the tears out of everyone, but they do signal leakage mapping for cable television companies. It's an FCC requirement, very, very bizarre stuff. But I asked him, "Oh, what are your minimums for hiring?" He said, "Do you have your commercial license?" And I said, "I will soon." He said, "All right, send me your resume when you get your commercial license." And that was late 2001. That was actually right before September 11th. I got my commercial license right after September 11th. So I sent in my resume, and in 2002, I got a call for a job interview, and there was a little bit of a lag in the hiring process, but by late 2002, I was flying with them, and I flew through them through most of 2003, and then there was a hiring resurgence happening at that time that had come back from the downturn of September 11th. And in that moment, I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to be an airline pilot, so I need to get my college degree. So my parents happened to be living in San Jose at the time, and so I put in my notice at the aerial mapping company. I'd logged, a little over 1,000 hours of total time there. So I was like, all right, I feel like I'm in a solid place logbook wise. Went back to college at San Jose State, and just didn't go for the aviation degree because I wanted to avoid any math or business classes. Which is, I know it sounds very lazy, but in my mind I was like, well, I already have my commercial license, so and I have all this flight time, so I'll just get the quickest, easiest degree I can get. And I like geography, so geography happened to work out. And it was, I finished the degree in 3 years from basically nothing. I was doing summer school every semester, so I did as much as I could while working full time in San Jose, and it actually afforded me the opportunity to get a job with. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Jim Lafferty, who used to sell airplanes at the San Jose airport. So I worked for Jim for about a year and a half, I guess, and then ended up getting hired by a company with the office next door to them. It was called V1 Aviation, which I believe still exists. It's a Part 91 corporate management. They had a couple King Airs and a couple Citations, and they kind of hired me on as a right seat warmer, to put it delicately. But I think it was a good experience. I didn't get type rated in the Citation, but it wasn't required on the King Air, and it was. But I was there for about 9 months, and then the economy took a dump there in 2008, and that was Uh, Out of work for a little while, did research projects at Moffett Field there, with like Flight Research Associates and a couple of other offices here and there. So that kind of sustained me. And then at the time, I was roommates with, I'm sure many of you know, or some of you might know, Mike Meskey, who was the chief pilot of Aperture Aviation, which was a kind of a new deal there at Reed Hillview Airport. And so one day I was sitting at home twiddling my thumbs, and he called. He said, "Hey, come to the office and bring your logbook with you." And I said, "Is this a job interview?" He said, "Yeah, just come down." And so they hired me, and it was, like that was kind of like for me the reset in my aviation career, because you know, 2 years earlier, I kind of thought I was in a good position with V1 aviation, corporate flying, and I thought that would, be a good stepping stone into jet flying in various different degrees. But so I was back to aerial mapping in single engine Cessna. But it was a good opportunity at the time because there wasn't a lot of hiring happening in aviation. So I stuck it out there for about a year, and then I went to Ameriflight for a little over a year, and then I ended up at SkyWest, and I was there for about 3.5 years. I got hired on the Brasilia, and then transitioned to the CRJ. And right before I was awarded an upgrade, I had applied to Calida Air, and I got the call for the interview, and it was kind of a toss up about which way to go. Maybe like the best thing to do would be to stick it out at SkyWest and get my turbine PIC time as a captain there. But to me, the opportunity to fly an airplane I've always wanted to fly, and basically go around the world every month, was just too good to pass up. And at the time, my estimates were that the pay would be about a wash between being a captain at SkyWest and being a first year FO at Calida Air. And it was, relatively speaking, we didn't have a great contract at the time that I got hired, but about a year later, we got a new contract, which increased the pay significantly, which was very nice. And then a year after that, I upgraded to captain, which was just, really lucky timing. And so it's been great to being a captain on the 747. I just one of those things, for somebody that grew up in the 80s and 90s, it's an iconic airplane, and I always wanted to be a pilot. And so, the dream to fly this airplane, especially as a captain, was just like something that was always present for me in my mind. And to now get to do that every day when I go to work, just feels incredibly lucky and fortunate. And as exhausting as our flying can be, I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy going to work, and I suspect I'll look back on my time at this company, assuming I don't retire here, but who knows? I won't even try to predict how my career is going to go in the next 25 years. But assuming I stick around, or I don't retire at Calida, I imagine that I'm going to look back on this flying as the absolute best flying of my career. I love the adventure. I love the variety. And I love flying the airplane. It's a fantastic airplane to fly. And the pay is pretty good right now too. So it's all just kind of come together for this particular moment in my career. So I'm just going to savor it and see what happens next.
Great. I think as random as you may think the degree is, I think you're living the degree. You're living the geography degree all over the world. So that it worked out. It worked out really well.
It did. Much to my surprise.
Yep. We got about 10 more minutes here, and I got a couple more questions. Okay, I got one here from Jim. Do you fly into any challenging airports, weird approaches, short runways? Anything else?
Occasionally, it, yeah. For a year and a half, 2 years, we had a contract with Turkish Airlines. We were operating out of the Istanbul airport for them, going kind of around Europe, a little bit of North Africa, Asia, and flights to America as well. But we were at the old Istanbul airport. They just opened a new one, I think, but roughly a year ago. They opened a new airport. But Istanbul is this huge, huge metropolitan city at this crossroads of two continents. You've been there, Abe, I know. But and when you went there, it was the old airport, right? You didn't. Yeah, that was.
Yep.
So anyway, the old airport was just so undersized for the amount of traffic and the kind of airplanes that were flying in and out of there. And I think the runway that they used generally for landing was, let's see, it was like 8,900 feet. It might have been somewhere around 9,000 feet. But it wasn't unusual to go in there near max landing weight in the 747, 652,000 pounds. And so that could be a challenging runway because it didn't really have a lot of margins for floating to landing. And I always told I always told my FOs going in there, I'm like, don't worry about finessing this. Just get it on the ground. It'll survive the impact. Get it on the ground, get the brakes and the reverses going, because there's not a lot of room if you land long. And fortunately, nobody had any problems there. But that was always an interesting airport to fly into. I took it into not an unusual airport to take a 747 into, but there's there's a small airport just outside of Tucson that it's an airplane storage facility. But the runway there, I think, is like 6,500 feet. So I took an empty airplane there for maintenance one time, and I was just like running the standard performance data, and it looked like it was going to be a little bit tight at the normal auto brake setting. So I said, okay, we'll use a higher auto brake setting, but on a dry runway on an empty airplane, as soon as the auto brakes kicked in, man, it was like we were in the shoulder harnesses and we stopped like halfway down the runway. So it's the airplane has a lot of capability. Takeoffs are a little bit more challenging in terms of field performance, stuff like that. But unfortunately, I didn't get to experience the glory of the Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong. That would have been really cool. But the Hong Kong airport now is super easy to fly in and out of. So no real cool approaches that we get to do on any regular basis, unfortunately. But nothing too challenging. You just kind of paying attention to your performance depending on how heavy the airplane is and how long the runway is. So
Great. Yeah, one of the plus sides to having a friend who flies cargo around the world is you might run into them. I ran into them twice. Once in Turkey, Istanbul, and then recently on my way back from India, I had stopped by in Hong Kong, and he met up with us and showed my family around. This was before the pandemic, and pretty nice to be able to. He always checks into his airport on Facebook, so I can see where he is. And says, hey, you're there too. Let's meet up.
Yeah.
So it's great. Two more questions here. I think we got time for that. Putting our COVID hat on here. Have you or any of your colleagues been infected with COVID, and what happens to the crew? I know you mentioned it was country dependent, but are there
so
airlines?
I have not yet that I'm aware of. But when I try to get tested when I come back in fact, I just got tested this morning at a local place here, so I'll find out in 4 days. But we have had crew members get sick, and we just operate by the CDC guidelines right now, which is basically, either a 14-day quarantine, and that company will pay for your hotel, and you get sick pay, so it's not like you're not losing out on anything. And the company's obviously super cooperative about it. But it's either 14-day quarantine or 10 days from the last symptom is what the guidelines that they're using. But we've had a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but people have got sick. We're very high exposure. So it happens, and it almost feels like an inevitability. But fortunately, nobody's been super sick in terms of symptoms. I know a couple guys that have had the symptoms, but for the most part, everyone's been kind of symptom free. But yeah, there's been positive tests for sure.
Got it. Another question here is, do you fly in any conflict areas?
Yes, yeah, we do. We do fly for the Department of Defense, and I think I think I'm allowed to say we go in and out of some airports in Afghanistan. And I don't even know how regular we do that anymore, because I personally haven't been into the country for almost 2 years now. But I think we still do somewhat regular flights into the country for the Department of Defense. So that's really the only hazard area we fly into now, and the company gives us a pay override, hazard pay, for operating those flights, which makes them desirable for for guys, because everyone wants the extra money. But the situation in Afghanistan has been relatively calm in terms of conflict. Really, the hardest thing about Afghanistan, that's probably those airports are challenging in terms of terrain and altitude, and in the summertime, the temperature as well. So, but I should have mentioned that on the challenging airport question. But it's like I said, it's been almost 2 years since I've been there, so I kind of forgot about it. But
Any what's your favorite airport or trip to go on, or leg that you do? Which one do you prefer?
well, was Hong Kong for a long time, man. That was my favorite place to go to. It was such a cool city, man. This so international. You can get by speaking English, and you could do anything there. Really, it's like great restaurants, good nightlife, just awesome. Great public transportation, as you saw. You can get around the city very easily. But now not only with the virus, but with the Chinese Communist Party in implementing these security laws that are restricting a lot of what you can do there. It's just not going to be the same place anymore. So I guess now I would put Brussels or Leipzig as my favorite overseas layover. Brussels is such a fantastic city, beautiful, and great food, great beer. And Leipzig is coming up as well as a city in Germany. It's had a huge industrial influx since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I think they had about a decade of a pretty bad depression in that part of Germany after reunification. But now it's totally revitalized and gentrified. Huge cargo hub for DHL. So, and it's a great town, university town, beautiful. Love it.
Nice. Any flights to northern Japan? I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but Hokkaido?
I have not been to Hokkaido. Our contract with Japan Airlines was to the Narita airport, and we Department of Defense flights through like Okinawa and it's the Yokota Air Force Base in the south, on the south side of Tokyo. So yeah, as for me personally, I've only been to Narita, Tokyo, and Okinawa. Excuse me. But the great thing about this company and the kind of flying we do is like could end up in Hokkaido to next week or next month. So it's one of the things I look forward to.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. That was a great Q&A session. I got an awesome comment from Walt, which I think all of us can echo here, which is that we need you in the future as a motivational speaker.
Oh,
some of our San Jose State students. I think the key is, when people can see that someone has achieved what you have, and they see that there's a path to it, they can really see themselves in those shoes. And and work towards it. Everybody's looking for a mentor, and it's like we all know, it's a very small, tight community. So any kind of help that we can get, guidance, would go a long way.
Yeah.
Definitely in the future.
If anyone wants to talk airplanes with me, I'm always happy to oblige.
Absolutely. Hopefully,
we keep you in mind and call on you when we do this pretty much every year. It's kind of a career meeting for the students to see what they're studying for, really.
Oh yeah.
And we had a number of interesting speakers with a career path like yours, which wasn't straightforward or whatnot. So lots of zigzagging around getting jobs and whatnot. So it's important for them to see that too.
Well, if my story can be of inspiration or use to anybody,
I think it is.
I'd be happy to share it.
Right.
I definitely get somewhat envious when I see these beautiful pictures of you at 38,000 feet, halfway across the world. It's very motivating and nice. So,
well, I enjoy it. I enjoy being there. So I'm glad I can share it and other people can enjoy it as well.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we're right on the mark for our time. I want to thank you, Stephen, for taking out the time. I know sometimes lining up the schedule with our weekly things can be difficult, but it was awesome that you were able to do it. I think everybody here really enjoyed it. And we'll keep our speaker series going on. We'll send an invite to everybody when we have our next one. Thank you for all the questions. And don't forget, if you haven't donated yet, I put the link at the top of the chat. It's the first comment there. If you haven't already, please consider donating. A little bit can go a long way, and especially in these trying times for students. With that, thank you, everybody. Stay safe with all the fires that are out there. And Stephen, again, thank you very much from behalf of the Aero Club.
Nice seeing everyone.
Have a good night.
Take care.
Good night.